Okay, welcome everyone to Thursday night class. Tonight we have an exciting class to learn. First of all, I'd like to dedicate this class to the Refuah Shalema, the complete healing of Levi Halevi ben Leah. They have a total and complete healing. Complete healing. It's the third class today that we dedicated to this particular healing because it's a big one. Hashem will help you be completely good, the most wonderful person around. Okay. The other thing I'd like to say that this class is going to be all about a dedication of a new home, which obviously is referring to the dedication of our new temple, Be'ezrat Hashem, the temple in Jerusalem. It's coming very soon. We're also dedicating it to the dedication and the inauguration of the palace of Mashiach that is going to be built, Be'ezrat Hashem. Most people don't know about that, but I do. So I'd like to dedicate on that as well. Thirdly, this class is dedicated in a tribute to our new building for our new Mayan Center. Well, those of you, I didn't speak about it much, but those of you who do know, those of you who are local, maybe some of you are this, that we are, Be'ezrat Hashem, going to move this beautiful center to a much larger place so that we can occupy far more space in this world, so that we can illuminate much more light and shine and bring many of you who listen to these classes to actually come and experience this magnificent, magical, beautiful, godly place that we have been here for 17 years. And we moved on to another space down the block, the corner, about 3.5 times the size of what we have now. And it's beautiful and it's special. And I would like to dedicate this class because this discourse, which is the last discourse, which indicates that the conclusion of the Hasidic teaching leads to the ultimate Beis Hamikdash, the ultimate future, and it leads also in our own personal journey over here to our new Hasidic center. So, and it's this is the conclusion of the book. Now, you know that the last 17 years, this book, Likutei Torah, is what we've been learning all along. So it only makes sense that the last is now. We still have quite a few discourses that we didn't learn, but we learned most of the book of Likutei Torah, and this is the last discourse. I think this is the Siyum. It ends with this powerful, and then it starts all over again, but on a much higher level, with this new, magnificent, beautiful building. Now, I say our new building. We still have to close on it. We're just in escrow in it. And I'll put it out there that I don't know yet how we're going to close on this building. So anybody who's listening and might want to participate in making that a reality, we have about another 8 days left. Please contact the office, or we will add a link to this on the video on YouTube and on Facebook. You can follow that link. But if it's a significant donation, probably better to give us a call or contact us through email on our website or whatever it is, and let us know that you are here to make this happen for us. We know for sure that the miracle is here based on an incredible story, but how, what, where, and when, we're going to see in this discourse that when it comes to the ultimate buildings, the ultimate godly places, those things come from a place that you don't know. It comes from a surprise source. So, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to put it out here online, and whoever might be listening, I don't even know in which part of the world, might say, hey, this is my chance to etch my loved one, my family member, someone special, or myself into this godly edifice that shines light across the entire world. So think about that. This is going to be your best investment because this center and the godly teachings that come through here is related to the future of the world more than most things happening. So here's your chance. Thank you. Now that I gave my pitch, we're ready to go. L'chaim. Okay, this discourse, now we're already now holding Parshas Noach. This discourse over here is in a discourse in the last Torah portion, Parshas Vizos HaBracha. which we concluded on Simchat Torah just a little week and a half ago. And because those discourses come, because that time of the year is so busy with holidays, we don't usually get to learn. So these are the discourses we don't get to learn. So it's good to learn them, even though we started already Bereshis and Noach. Who wants to leave the Torah portion of the Zos HaBracha? This is the blessing that Moshe blesses the Jewish people. We want to hang out under the umbrella of those blessings, or under the shower head of those blessings, for as long as we can. So I will keep you here for this week and next week, Bezrat Hashem, to learn this discourse. It's one of the most beautiful discourses, and it's really, really super special. And it talks about the three acquisitions in life, things that we need, things or the three elements that support our physical well-being in this world, in order that life should be sustainable. People need primarily three things. You need food, you need clothing, and you need shelter. And this entire discourse is going to be based on the significance, both physically and spiritually, and in the divine realm, of these three, the structure of life based on food, clothing, and shelter. And it's just great. It's just this awesome discourse. He begins the discourse on a verse. It's also interesting. Why is this the last discourse of the Parsha of Zos HaBracha? Why was it put into the Parsha of Zos? It has nothing to do with Zos HaBracha in an open way. There's nothing here that talks about the blessings of Moshe. So, but it seems like the Tzemach Tzedek wanted to put these two discourses in the end of Likutei Torah, both beginning with the words Mizmor Shir Chanukah. One of them we learned already years ago, and this is the second one. Why there are two discourses on Mizmor Shir Chanukah Sabayis LeDavid in the end of Zos HaBracha? It seems like the Tzemach Tzedek, who's the grandson of the author, wanted to put these as the last discourses. Looks like the ultimate final blessing and the conclusion of the Torah leads us to that house. And in our case, to our new Hasidic center. Because this is Hasidus talking about a house. Let's call it the Baal Shem Tov's house. Let's call it the Mashiach's house. Okay. The discourse is going to follow, is based on a verse, not in Parshas Zos HaBracha that I just mentioned, but in Psalms, Psalm 30. Psalm 30 begins with beautiful, one of the most beautiful Psalms. If you can say on one of them that is more beautiful than the others, but that we appreciate, that we can see its beauty. It's Mizmor Shir. It's the song that King David composed. We once learned that Mizmor is referring to musical instruments, and Shir is referring to vocals. We were learning a discourse just a few months ago about that. Chanukah Sabayis means the dedication of the house. King David made a special composition and a song for the dedication of the temple years before the temple was built. He already created the music to be sung at that event. He wasn't allowed to build a temple, but he did all the preparations to build the temple, and he already produced the song for that occasion. We also already had the music already in our new building. See, I'm following King David. We did already an event there, a musical event honoring the building, just like King David. Years before it was actually built, he already had it. See, I'm just we're well synchronized over here. In any case, Mizmor Shir Chanukah Sabayis LeDavid, a song of the dedication of that, and then it goes on where David HaMelech, King David, is expressing his incredible thankfulness to God for that gracing us and him in the Davidic dynasty of the kingdom of David to have the honor to build for him a home and to create the ultimate edifice for God. So this discourse begins on those words, Mizmor Shir Chanukah Sabayis LeDavid. Lahavin Atam, to understand the reason. Again, this is in the book Likutei Torah, page 196. Lahavin Atam, to understand the reason. Why do we make a mishta. Mishta means a feast, a drinking feast. See, that's why we have that out today. We have the tequila out. We don't always have the tequila out, but it's out tonight because it says a feast. Good l'chaim. V'simcha, and we make a big, joyous celebration. B'Chanukah Sabayis, by a dedication of a home. Why, for a dedication of a home, do we make such a mishta v'simcha? So he right away says, let's understand the value of a home, the true spiritual value of a home. So we find in Yesh Gimel B'Chinos, there are 3 levels. Mazain, there is clothing. Mazain, food. Ulavushim, and there's garments. Ubatim, and there is homes. That means that a person, in order to be sustained, needs food. Right? We can't live without food. We also need clothing. We need clothing to be able to live in the environment. It's cold, it's heat, hot, whatever. These are absolute essentials. In addition to modesty, but in addition to that, a person needs clothing to shield them from the elements. But one also needs to live in a home. And without a home, life is miserable. It even says an expression that a person is hardly a person when they don't have a home. It's what makes humans different than animals. Animals they also have homes, but it's not really a full construct home. They can live out in the wilderness. A human being needs a home. But it's interesting. We see even animals have that idea that they need they have their den, their lair, their whatever it is, their nest. Like it says in Tehillim, Gam tzipor matzah dror. Even a tzipor finds a bird makes itself a little nest. So these 3 are the necessities of life. So mazain, food, uchayis pnimi. Food is the way, but the manner in which they impact the person is different. Food delivers life. Food turns into life because food turns into blood, and through the blood we're alive. And we all know that without food, God forbid, one can come to starvation and they can't survive. So, but how does food sustain a person? You take it in. You assimilate it into your body. You are who you eat, which means your food becomes your body. And that's what it means. It's an internalized type of a infusion. It's an infusion of life through the food. Lagufa Adam, to the body of a person, nase pnimius v'chayus. It becomes pnimius. It becomes internalized. V'chayus lo, and it becomes energy to him. Throughout ayidei keres, through the stomach, v'hakeva, and the digestive tract. It's through the whole digestion process. It takes the food and translates it into them. They cook the food. Cooking over here means they kind of break down the food. And what happens is, and the best of the food, they digest and and after the food has become completely broken down to its tiniest elements, what is mufchar, which means what is choicest over there, what is of the finest of the food, what is valuable, the nutrients of the food, the vitamins that are in it, the whatever is good in the food, that rises to the brain. Vinasa means it becomes part of the blood and eventually get to the brain to keep the brain alive. Vinasa pnimi, and when we say rises to the brain, it even strengthens someone's head. Now, you don't eat for a while, you become very weak. You don't have power even to think, or even if you're thinking very deliriously. To be able to think deeply and strongly, you need to have a sharpness of the mind. Takes the food that you eat. So what are you seeing? The food literally becomes what he wants to show. It becomes life for the body, but he wants to show how far upgraded does it go. It becomes not just life in general for the human being to give you strength to kick a ball, that too. But it becomes even a more refined force of life, that it gives life to the mochin, to the mind of a person. The chayus, and it becomes life lamochin, to the mind. The ivarim, and to all the limbs. Shemachazik as kol ivarov, It strengthens all of a person's limbs from head to toe, all through the food. So that's the first form of that's the first form of necessity, of sustaining element that we have in life. Then comes the second thing, the levushin, and you have garments. What are they? Now, garments are not something that you digest and integrate in your body. They are placed upon the body, on top of the body. They encompass, they surround the person. Shemakifoi, they wrap itself around umalbishoi, and it encloses the person. Umatzil oisoi, it acts as a protector, makar, from cold. Right? So winter is coming. Not everybody's fortunate to live in the weather that we have over here in LA, but even here in LA, you can start wearing a sweater or a light jacket. In other places, when winter comes, you really got to bundle up. That's a shout out for my friends in Chicago. So the food goes, and it not the food, the clothing, and it saves the person mikor, from coldness, v'chaim, and from heat. That means that if, God forbid, you don't have anything to shield you, you can get sunburned really bad of your body. So you wear, you go hiking, you go out, or you stay out in the sun, you wear a cap, a hat. It saves you from the heat of the sun, or else, right? Levat but how is it impacting us? By remaining on the outside of the person. The ein nasa pnimius v'chayus, but it does not become internalized, and it doesn't become life, a life force, an internal life force, kamoya mazain, like the food. However, on the other hand, it surrounds the person, but he adds the words mamish. That means it surrounds the person literally, meaning sheltering the person by being placed on directly, being wrapped on the body. Clothing you wear close to your body, attached to your body. Batim, now, homes, homes are a house, is also encompassing a person. But not like garments that sit literally on the person. In other words, your home also surrounds you, but your house does not sit directly in close proximity to your body. A house is farther away. The walls of your home, the roof of your home, are surrounding you from a distance. Which isn't the case of the homes. They are completely far from the person. And the better the home usually is larger. You don't want to live in a cramped spot. It's not a quality in your house if your house is very, very, very close to your body. Then you have a problem. If the walls and ceiling, because then you're living cramped up, and that's not livable. The whole point of a house, it creates a space, but it gives you an openness, not a verquetschtkeit, right? Like an expansion. But yet you can't be under the sun and just be in the expanse of the outside. That doesn't work for a person. You need an enclosed area. But that enclosed area is supposed to be enclosing you and surrounding the person, but from a distance. Now we see something really interesting. From the three things, food, garments, and a living space, we find that food is the most inexpensive. I mean, we all have grocery bills, but the grocery bills, whenever you shop, when you go shop, for example, when you're going shopping to the grocery and buying whatever, food for the week, your bill is less than when you're going out and you're going to now fill your wardrobe, going shopping for I don't know, wherever you shop, buying suits and dresses and all that stuff is far more expensive than a shopping to the local market. In Iran, we see Shamazain that food Nikne Yosef is always bought at a much cheaper price. Min alavushim from the garments. Now, vilavushim. Now I'm going on to subject over here. Vilavushim and garments Yosef Bezol come out to be financially attainable and far more accessible, meaning the monies that you need for that, minabatim, than when it comes to homes. A home is already a major cost. All right? So many people can't afford to buy homes. A home, especially to make it your house, it's a fortune of money, especially if you're living in a place where people want to live. Real estate is the most expensive thing, and homes cost a lot. So again, a human being, God creates us with all these needs, and God also gives us access to these needs. But it's easy for people to put together money for himself, whether through working or doing whatever it is, to be able to purchase lunch. I mean, at least for most people, that's pretty attainable. To get clothing, that's already, you have to already dig into your savings, or sometimes you have to take in a little bit to build a wardrobe. But then if you get buying a house, that's already a big, big deal, especially if you're buying a big building over here. It's a really big deal. It costs a lot of money. Now at first glance, now really in terms of real value, it should have been the opposite. Why? Shamazon, food that literally becomes life. Food translates to life. So the value of that is like priceless. So that should cost an enormous amount. Like this is like the most, like gold and diamonds in the sense that this is literally with these food. We say a person gives away all the money in the world for life. Food is life. So food should be the most precious, should be the most expensive. Now, obviously, we'll soon see that you can give a very simple reason. The cost of everything is always in accordance to its availability. The more scarce something is, the more expensive it is. The more common it is, the less it is. So food is a lot of everywhere. It's the abundance of it. Therefore, it's at a lower price. That's true. But on a deeper level, what's the reason for that? In terms of the deeper value, food that becomes literally pnimi, the highest law, and its life to the person. How does it become life to them? It becomes you. It becomes absorbed and integrated and completely surrendered to the person. If you ate a cucumber and the cucumber remains a cucumber in your body, that's not healthy. You need that all the food that you eat, the vegetables you eat, they have to literally disintegrate into you. That means bittul. They become part of you. They become unified with the person. And they become life to the soul. One cannot live at all without food. At all we mean for any pretty short duration of time. We need food. We eat every day. We don't only eat once a day to kind of feel strong and healthy and vibrant. If they eat probably significantly at least twice a day. Therefore, he says it should have been that should be the most expensive milavushim from garments, which seem to be more like less of a need. It's not life to the person. They only encompass the person. I say the kain levushim. Now again, the simple reasons, as we said before. Food is in abundance. Clothing already it takes much more manufacturing and creating and making, especially if you want the clothing to be nice. The question is, God who created all this, why did he make it that way, that this should be of greater value? God could have made clothing also be growing on the trees and make a dime a dozen. I mean, God is the one setting up a system. And God says, I need to provide you with internal life, and I need you to provide you with an external protection. So God is designing the world. Obviously, God sat down and was figuring out the economics of creation before he created. And he says, these people that I'm going to create, what are going to be their needs? They're going to need food. They're going to need clothing. And he came up, obviously, in his plan that how this is all going to work. It's going to work through the world of commerce and the world of money, and there's going to be a value system and so on and so forth. So God could have just as tailored and developed the world in a way that the clothing should be just as easy to access. You roll out outside, you go outside in the morning in your garden, you see all kinds of leaves and stuff. You can right away take, like it says, Adam and Eve initially cover themselves in leaves. It should have been, well, the reason why we don't cover ourselves in leaves is because it's just not the style. But had we kept up the Adam and Eve thing, we could have been doing that. That would have been our clothing, and it would have been would have been pretty inexpensive, or maybe even less than food, which it should be. And yet God created it in a way that everywhere in the world, clothing costs more than the food. Why is that? That's the question. We're asking on a deep level. That must just mean that the inner content of clothing is that it's really more valuable than food. But he's asking, why is that? The real value is what turns into life. This is only protecting from the outside. Protecting from elements. It's less value. And especially when you're going to measure now where it really gets super expensive. And God, and sometimes very challenging to afford it, is the home. Now, clothing is like, you can't run around on the street without clothing. Even homeless people, they still have clothing. Because in other words, the necessity of to have something on your body, especially if it's cold in the winter, or you need is an absolute. We do have, sadly, people that are homeless, and they live. So the house, unless it's a very extreme weather or a very extreme situation where the clothing will not protect, then you really need a home. So, of course, for the psychological well-being, you really need a house. But for immediate physical life, the most important is the food. Second important is clothing. And third is a house. So why is the home so much more expensive than the garments? That's the question. Same will ask the question, garments compared to the home. Is the value of it is like food compared to garments. Just like food is far more valuable than garments, garments are more valuable. When I say more valuable, I mean more of the necessity to life than a house. And yet, God created a world, that's it. God created a world where it's going to cost, a person is going to have to invest an enormous amount of their resources to be able to achieve a house. Which means God wants in our mind that we should appreciate that a home is more valuable that it really has more value, intrinsically more value. Because the world, there's a certain truth to the world. It's not just society makes these things up. Especially something like this, which crosses all societies. From the beginning of time till now, a home always was harder to get than to get clothing, and to get in all societies and all over history and in all cultures. It's always that way. In other words, it's fundamental to human living. Well, why is it that way? The simple reason that is given on the most simplest of levels. Very simple answer. Food is cheap. He's giving a different answer than we said, but not just because it's so available, but he's giving another explanation. Every day you need different food. So the value of the food is it's giving you life, but it's giving you life for a day. Tomorrow you're back to square one. You need food again. So the consuming of it gets consumed very quickly. Something that gets consumed very quickly, you're paying only for a day's worth of enjoyment. But when you're buying a suit, you're talking about a year or 2 years or 3 years that you could be wearing it. Maybe 5 years. A pair of shoes you can have for a while. Your wardrobe lasts longer since the benefit of it is longer. It's long term. So that you're paying for that long-term usage. And as long-term, and based on this value system, we can understand that your wardrobe also keeps on switching, from time to time, you're switching out your clothing. First of all, the seasons make you switch your clothing, but especially also as life, as there's wear and tear. But a home that can last you a lifetime. And because of that, it's a one-time purchase, but it's going to last you for a life. And that's the reason why, because of its lasting power, you're paying kind of it. The value of it is because of your benefit and your enjoyment of this. That's going to be for years. Not only you can pass it on to your children. And then it has like a very long range value to it. It doesn't last long. Immediately after the food gets digested, you're back to square one again. Yesterday's lunch is only good until tomorrow. Then you're back to square one all over again. You need a new meal. Which is in the case of garments. Garments, they last a year or a little more than a year. How do you like that? Now, if you want to know if your husband is complaining that you're buying too much, you're shopping too much, tell him that in the Likutei Torah it says you need to change your wardrobe every year. Okay, it says over here. I'm going to get in trouble with all the men. There's a lot of men who are also into their clothing and change it every year, every month. And clothing, and homes have lasting power for longer, more than the clothing. And therefore, the clothing, the mayim yekadim and alavushim, their money is more valuable than the clothing. Because they last longer. Hear the Maaseh? Clothing, what happens with clothing? They're more expensive from the clothing because they last even longer. And garments cost more than food, also for the same reason. In other words, we're going to base, that's the simple reason. Now, he doesn't refute that reason. He says that makes sense. But he's looking but he said that in brackets, which means we want to find a truer, deeper reason for that. In truth, maybe that itself needs explanation. Why did God create the world that your home, which is a protection from the least necessity in a sense for a person's actual living, should be in a way that you have it for a lifetime, and clothing should be so wear and tear, and food should be should expire so quickly. That itself we need to understand. It's because everything in the physical world is reflecting the spiritual dynamics. And in the spiritual world, when we'll see it over there, we'll appreciate, because clothing represents something of so much higher power, so much greater, because of a level of godly energy that is so much higher than what the divine energy that food represents. And a home, a living space, represents the highest godly energy. And therefore it is so valuable. But in truth, the root of these three levels, Lamaila, that are above, Habatim Sharsham Lamaila Yoiser Givayim and Alavushim. Homes, their root is higher than garments. In other words, as these things descend from God, from the spiritual worlds, whatever we have in the physical is mainly a condensing of these spiritual powers. The garments are a higher, more powerful energy than the food, than what goes into food, and the home represents this enormous divine energy, as he explains. So he says the root of a home. Now, even though a home is made up usually of a lower form of material, homes are made up of stones, bricks, stones. You can make homes out of logs as well, but in general, most homes made out of bricks and mortar or stone, which is really the lowest material. Clothing are made out of either animal wool that comes from an animal, or linen, and which is a plant. Food is also made up of animals and of vegetation. So they have their the material of it is of a higher, more sophisticated form of life. So that's another reason why the home should be the least expensive. It's made out of stones, and yet it's the most expensive. And that's telling us, because it's not the physical home that you're paying for. You're really paying for the spiritual power that you're getting in the home, the divine imbuing of the divine light that's coming to you through your home. Inside your physical home dwells the divine home. A level of godly, everything is God. Everything is a manifestation of God to you. God is manifesting to you in your home on a much higher level than he's manifesting to you in your clothing, and he's manifesting you in your food on a much lower level, on a more limited level than his manifestation to you of your garments. And that's the reason. These three levels, homes have a higher root than garments, and the garments from the food, as it is known. Now he's going to address the idea that why, if it's so lofty, why is a home should have been made out of like very, very, very high, sophisticated materials. And why is it that homes are made up of the most simplest things, literally stones? Shakol, but we know an amazing rule. Anything that has fallen lower in this world, this world in general was created through a collapse of a primordial spiritual ancient world, which is a concept discussed in Kabbalah and mysticism, and it's rooted in non-mystical Torah, and it's even rooted in the hinted to, but needs interpretation of mysticism in the Chumash itself in many places. One of them right in the beginning, when it says the world was tohu and vohu, the world was empty and desolate. It's referring to that spiritual world that once existed that fell and collapsed. There was a shattering. It's a concept in Kabbalah called the shattering of the vessels. Through this amazing process of shattering of energies, some of those crumbs of that energy made its way down and has manifested in this world and becomes the source of life for all material things. The lower something is in the physical world means that it comes from a spark that is higher in that early on, very, very lofty spiritual world. So stones and inanimate matter really are rooted in a much higher place than the more spiritual forms of life. So first of all, the very idea that a home is made out of stones is already telling you that the home is enormously great. Everything that fell down lower comes from a higher place. That's in as much as we're analyzing the materials of it. But now he's going to analyze not so much the material, but more the general effect that it has on a person. What's your relationship with these, like we began in the beginning when he discussed the proximity to the person. The food is very close to a person. It's so close to you, it becomes you. There's no separation between you and your food that you've eaten. It literally is you. Your clothing attach itself to you, but they still remain outside of you. And the home keeps a distance. So to understand this is indicating on these let's see what that means spiritually. And the idea is these three things exist olam in the world of souls, in the world of spirit. That in the no, I'm sorry, olam is not spirit. Olam means in space. There's a concept in the book of Yetzirah, in the book of formation, that everything is made up in the dynamics of olam, which means world, shana means time, and nefesh means spirit, souls. And that makes up the full dynamic of all of existence. So for example, the entire reality is made up of space and time. And the person who's living it, the being that's living in this time and space and experiencing the time and space. That's nefesh, that's soul. So he's saying these three things exist in each one of them. A house, the concept of a home, a garment, and a soul. I'm sorry, no, a home and a garment and food. So B'Briyas Ha'olam is in the creation of the worlds. And this idea also reflects in Torah and in mitzvot. And he's going to show us how in the world of spirituality, in the world of our connection to God, we have, in the spirit, forget about our physical lives, our spiritual well-being as a human, as a sustaining spiritual being in this world requires spiritual food, spiritual clothing, and spiritual living space. How do we have that? Where do we have that? That comes about through the Torah and the mitzvot. The gam b'Torah b'mitzvahs. And also in Torah and mitzvahs, we're going to find there's an element in Torah that's food. There's an element that is a garment, and there's a lavush, and there's an element to it that is a home. Because it is known, it is known that there is two general levels of the divine interacting with creation. One level of the divine interacting in the creation is that the Zohar says that God fills all worlds. What does it mean he fills all worlds? He lowers himself down to fill each creature in accordance to his capacity. But then there's another form of life called Sovev Kalalman. What is Sovev Kalalman? Sovev Kalalman means that God encompasses all worlds. He surrounds all worlds. So God fills all worlds and he surrounds all worlds. What does it mean? He fills all worlds. Is the power of the maker that is in the thing that is made. Everything in this world has a life force. That life force brings it into existence, fills it. And in that, every creature and every being has a different form of energy. For example, we know that when God created the worlds and continues to sustain and create the worlds, he creates it through his words. He communicates to it. But he says different things because he has to create different formulas to create different creatures. Every creature has its own formula. That formula is the indwelling energy of God. God is, so to speak, entering spiritually into the creature to make him from him or her, or the entity, the creature, the substance, to create it by filling it, which means by stepping into the formation in which he's making. And that is coming. And he's going to explain that comes from the very tail end of God. From the very tail end, meaning from the most minuscule, tiniest little extension of God extending his infinite power through a very, 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 very small, tiny little ray. That tiny little ray becomes the sustaining life force, which lowers itself down into every nook and cranny of a creation to sustain it and to make it. So, in Kabbalistically, that dimension that I said earlier, which is the tail end, so to speak, of God, the final stage of God contracting himself to his tiniest manifestation. And that is the last of the divine attributes called Malchus, kingship, Shekhinah, sometimes referred to as Shekhinah. That power, that life force, is the mother of all of creation, which means from the Shekhinah, from the kingship element of the divine, God lowers him, God speaks to the world. Malchus is also called mouth. From that place, God speaks to the world and says, let there be light, let there be bumblebees, let there be cats and dogs. And it's all through his speech. But that's the indwelling energy. Hashem enlivens the world's biyah of the three lower worlds called the three lower worlds, meaning the worlds of creation. Bria is the world of creation. Yetzirah is the world of formation. Asiyah is the world of completion, which is the sum totality of all of existence as reflected. I have to connect it to this week's parsha, as reflected in the Teva of Noach, in the Ark of Noach, that Noach's Teva had 3 floors. So they represent the 3 worlds. So all the creatures of all 3 worlds, God speaks them into existence, but to each creature, he speaks a different language to create that particular creature. Azai, then, mislabeshes mamish bibiyah. So then how does it work? God encloses himself completely into his creations. Biyah meaning the 3 worlds, as mentioned earlier. B'pchenes pnimius, in an internal way, v'chayos, and life force. Just like the soul that enlivens the body. Just like the soul enlivens the body in all the manners of the body. The power up. And in that sense, it's a little bit similar to a soul enlivening a body. Just like when the soul goes into the body, it also delivers to each organ and to each limb a unique, tailored power that fits that organ and fits that limb. So it's not like the soul just uniformly energizes the body and the limbs will each one do with that uniform energy whatever that limb does best. It's not what happens. The soul has a power of vision that it delivers into the eyes. And the soul has a power of speech that it delivers through the speaking system, which culminates in the mouth. And so is each particular power of the soul matches that particular organ where it's going to manifest. In the same way, God kind of splinters his energies into all these variations to fill the entire world with a soul. It's almost like God is the soul and the creation is the body, and he vests himself into each, and when you into each creature and into each being. And when you vest yourself in something, you need to enter it. You need to be its size. You can't be bigger than it. The power of vision, Shmiya, the power of hearing, Reach, the power of smelling, Dibur, the power of speech. All those things vest themselves where? Barosh. They have one general location. They have individual stations as well. When you get more particular, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, fine. But in general, they all manifest in the head. The yadayim, and then the hands, the halev and the heart, the hakeres and the stomach, the hakeva and the digestion, the haraglayim and the feet. So then he moves to the midsection of the mid compartment of the human body. So there you have the hands, the stomach, the organs, and so on and so forth. there is a different type of soul manifestation. The vision and the intelligence don't go there, don't reveal themselves there. Over there, energies that match those organs and those limbs vest themselves into the midsection of the person. And then the lowest power of the person, the plain power to walk, that goes down into the feet. So everything is great. Everything matches. Energy matches the container. If you say that ishtalshalos, like the order of evolution. The same is, now let's look at the whole universe and the whole, including the spiritual worlds. We'll look at it as one large, huge body, and God is the life force of that body, but not through a uniform energy that's equal in everybody, but in a specific tailored form of life to each creature, to each world, to each station. The same is also above. The malchus of Atzilus. That encloses itself in the three lower worlds: creation, formation, and completion. To enliven the worlds. Also goes down in an internalized way. When we say it's internalized mind, means it becomes so assimilated into the creation that you don't even notice there's the divine energy there. The divine energy becomes the thing. It and the thing are so intertwined. Now you get it. It's this exactly like food. Food enters you as something else, but then it becomes you. So this is called, on a large, one of the ways of defining the divine energy that is assimilated into the world completely is that's called the divine nourishment. It's the divine food. The world eats the godliness that God is sending, assimilates it in it, and that's how it is sustained. And this has to continuously be renewed. Just like food is constantly being renewed, God is constantly descending into these words to sustain and to make the creation. This is not long lasting. The words are continuously re-spoken, revitalized. In all, God is so preoccupied in you that he's continuously saying your name to make you. An incredible thought. He doesn't stop saying your name. If he would stop saying our name for a second, we wouldn't be. But he has to say each one of us individually. It's a lot of things to say. And this is the meaning of one of the verses in Psalms, Psalm 145, I think, the famous Psalm of Ashrei, in which we say Ashrei, we say 3 times a day. We say, Kavod Malchus Chayomeru, the glory of his kingship, they speak, meaning God's creations speak of God's glory, referring to the angelic beings and those down here that like to talk about God. They speak about the glory of his kingship. Ugvurascha, and that his might, Yedaberu, they speak. They speak of the glory of his kingdom and of his might. So what are we talking about? We're talking about kingship. What did we say earlier? What's kingship? Kingship is this infused energy, this integration where God is integrating and speaking to the world. But we continue in the next verse. Lohodia, to notify, libnei Adam, to the sons of man, Gevuro Sav, his power. Now, we know already from so many different classes that when we relate power to God, we mean the power to constrict, the power to limit. Because for an infinite God whose energies are undefined and limitless, to become so specific and so crumbed down to the tiniest little features of our tiny little world and to every detail and sub-detail, and to that God has to contract his energy to be the ingredient, the spiritual, divine ingredient for a butterfly, which is so different than another creature that's just similar, but yet, so God has to tailor his energy to such small minutia that takes enormous amount of of limitation from God, where he limits himself, self-constrains. And that's why we say that kingship, this form of life, goes through an enormous amount of constrictions, actually limitless amount of limitations and screenings until it becomes limited. This is called might. Vitzimtzumim and contractions. To create the worlds that are separated in consciousness from God, into a divisible manner, to many, many details without an end. And that's the reason why it's called filling all worlds, because it's an internal life. The power of the affector, benifal, in the thing that is affected. So that's one level. And that's food. But then there is a much higher presence of God in the world. And that presence of God does not contract and tailor itself to the details. Remains in an infinite state. Remains in the loftiness of the super being. And that is called encompassing energy. It encompasses the most spiritual world and the physical earth equally. No one digests this energy. No one can process it. No one can integrate it. Not the most magical angel above. Not the most brilliant and bright celestial being. Not the holiest mind, distant mind in existence can process it. Because that's only when God limits himself. This is God as he is. He allows his light to shine unrestricted and unlimited. But he's wrapping himself around all of existence. When we say wrapping, doesn't mean that he's outside. He's everywhere, but he's above the details of the creation, the differentiations of the creation. It's one singular light. And that's primarily responsible for making the worlds be from not being. See, there's one common feature that we all share. All of us, let's talk, all creatures that live on planet Earth, we all share one common feature. Not only the creatures of planet Earth, the planet, even the aliens that live in other planets, or spiritual aliens, like the angels, who inhabit billions, gazillions of worlds that there are, in which is populated with all kinds of beings and creatures. What do we all share in common? Is that we exist. We are creatures that are in existence. We maybe exist in different dimensions, but we're still in existence. We're brought into existence, obviously, by God. That common denominator that exists across all of God's worlds is that they exist instead of non-existing. Who's responsible to that? Not the detailed energy. There is first one general desire that there should be a creation. That desire is one desire, swooping desire. There should be worlds. That does not differentiate between one world and another world. It's a one powerful, uniform, I want worlds. I want creation. Then comes the chopping board that chops everything into its own unique shape and form. The cookie cutter that cuts each creation into its own style. This is a creature that's going to live in a spiritual world, and this is a creature that's going to live in a physical world. This creature is going to be an inanimate object in the physical world, and this creature is going to be an animal, and this creature is going to be a bird or a fish or whatever. So all these things, that's already going to be the secondary form of life, which we discussed earlier. The energy of God that's called food that goes down into and processes and assimilates into each creature. But then there is this overall powerful infinite light that couches the world from the outside, that hugs the world, so to speak. It's everywhere, but it's holding everything into existence by being above the parameters and definitions of each creature and each being. Now that level is called clothing. Now we understand that clothing is not just a little bit more valuable than food. Clothing is enormously more valuable than food once you appreciate it from this level, because where clothing comes from, the idea that it's representing is energy of God that is purely that is infinitely transcendent. And food is the minuscule crumbs of the divine energy that become so limited and specified. That's what he explains over here. And the surrounding energy that's not enclosed in the world, in an internal way, but rather surrounds and encompasses them, as stated in the book of Tanya, which this energy, which enlivens the world. Now, and here he adds that idea that we said earlier, the main power, the main force of life that brings us into existence, is this encompassing power. It's above and beyond the 10 sefirot of the world of Atzilut, which the 10 sefirot is already the beginning, especially Malchus. Malchus, which is the last sefira, is the most engaged. But even the other sefirot, they're already the beginning of the adjustment of the light, as God is adjusting it so that he can adjust it to detail so that it can go into Malchus and then become very, very limited and very defined. What he basically is doing is he's extending the Mamala Kalam, and not just to include Malchus, which is the tail of the Sefirot, but even the higher Sefirot. All Sefirot are really part of the Mamale, of the indwelling light, as opposed to Keser. See, this is the idea. This energy is the energy of Keser. Which is the energy of Keser is called a garment. It wraps itself around the world. It's higher than the 10 attributes of Atzilus of the world of emanation, which the Spheros are what becoming clothed. The 10 spheres of Atzilus, they become enclosed in the 10 spheres of each world. What he's trying to show you is that there is a level in the divine that, as we said earlier, which is God detailing himself, that begins in a very godly world, in the world of Atzilus. But over there is where God is already adjusting himself into certain definitions. And then those divine emanations and definitions later invest itself into much lower worlds, which are the actual dimension of creation. The idea that it becomes enclosed over here should not be misunderstood with clothing. The fact that it becomes enclosed means that it already relates to the realm of food, going in the inside of something. The beyond the 10 spheres of Bria, Tzionasira, Chesed Atzilus, Chesed Bria, the kind element, the kindness of the world of Atzilus, which is pure divine kindness, becomes enclosed in the kindness of Bria, Kenis Kaliel, and so forth. That's the source of limited energy. But this level is above and beyond that, the Sovev Kalam. The Nikren, it is called Keser Elyon, the supernal crown, which is the gematria of this year, like we discussed. Tavshin Pei Vav is a year to go get yourself good garments. Keser Elyon, the supernal garment. But really, Keser Elyon has a higher meaning. It means really the level of house, as we're going to see later, even on a deeper level. But now we're still, even the lower level, there's the lower level of Keser. Keser Elyon. So this dimension called the crown, seeing it's above the human, the The attributes of God are called the human, where God makes himself into the shape of a human. The crown that God wears means his light prior to him emanating into attributes above that. And therefore, it's an encompassing energy. Keser actually also means to circle something, to go around. When this is meaning, now he says in brackets, Kol asher chafetz Hashem asa. This level of creation. Now, what does this mean? It's not like this dimension, as we discussed earlier, just sits silently. God, as he's not, one can say, okay, this level is God as he's not interacting with creation prior to his interaction. That's not it. He is affecting the creation. Not only that, it's precisely from this transcendence is where creation is deriving its very power to exist. But this is bringing everything into existence from a distant place, meaning without God meddling in the details. He just wills it into existence. And that's why he says that's what the verse says. Everything that God desired, he made. So the deeper meaning is not just, of course, everything he desired, he made. He didn't make anything he didn't desire, because if he didn't desire it, he wouldn't make it. You don't need King David to say that. Or the meaning, the deeper meaning over here is the desire itself makes, the desire creates. Not that he later made what he desired. The desire is responsible for the making. As soon as he wishes it to be, it exists. But this is a very high level of existence. This is existence as it is being born out of the infinite light. And therefore, it affects all of creation equally. Then God continues to create the world, but instead of creating it from his desire, he begins to create it from his speech. When God creates the world from his speech, then he's already stepping close. Not only close, he's stepping into each creature that he's creating. He himself is stepping into each creature that he's creating, which is the detailed light, which is the Mamala Kolalman light, the indwelling light of God. The Sphirot range. This process begins in the Sphirot, in the attributes, and primarily manifests as the divine speech, which is the Malchut element, which goes into each detail. That everything that Hashem desired, he made. The main power of the world's being into being, comes from Hashem's desire, that it's and his supernal will. As explained in the discourse where it says they should bring a garment of kingship, which is referring to Megillas Esther, that in every creation there's these double energy. In every creation there is life that is coming down to each creature from the indwelling light of God, but there's also a higher energy in each creature which we share equally. That is V'Soivav Kalalman, that's the encompassing light. And that the main power of creation, of bringing worlds into existence, is from the Sovev, is from the encompassing light. It's like the Sovev Kalalman brings you the dough, the Mamala Kalalman creates the cookie shapes of each creature in each being. However, okay, so that's garment. But now he says what we were saying earlier, that Achyash Beketer, in the level of crown itself, there is Beis Bechinois, there's two levels in crown. One level, let's understand this before he continues. We know that Keser is made up of two partsufim. Partsuf means configuration. A lower configuration and a higher configuration. The lower configuration of Keser is called Erech Anpin, and the higher configuration of Keser is called Atik Yom. What is And what's the difference between them? They are light years away. The whole function of Keser. Let's first before we get into explaining, then what is the function of Keser in general? Keser is not God. Keser is an intermediate in a level of intermediacy. I don't know if that's a right word, probably not. It's an intermediate. I don't know, my words are not working today. An intermediate, I don't want to say intermediate as if it's like something on its own. It's not. It's a intermediate, let's see, level. I'm sorry for that word. That God, Hashem, emanates his light into Keser to serve as a connector to the next stage of his light, to translate the infinite into the more finite dimensions. So what does that mean? The first real detailing of God's energy into details happens in the Sefirot. And that's why they're called emanations. God is appearing already. His energy, his life force, his projection of his energy is taking on already a certain definition. God is appearing as a kind being. He is manifesting as a disciplinarian. He's manifesting as a judge, as a disciplinarian. So these are already features. Now, God's infinite light, not just God himself, but even his infinite light, has no features whatsoever. So how do you go from, because a feature is a limitation. He's not limited. So how do you go from utter limitlessness into limitation? That itself requires a communication, a medium. What's the medium? That's the level of Keser. And that's the meaning that he says over here, that Keser is the go-between between the Netzalim, the Matzil, and the Netzalim. In Hebrew, the word Matzil means emanator. Netzalim means emanations. So the attributes of God, they're already emanations. The emanator is God himself. So what's in between the emanator and the emanations? This middle level called Keser. It's where there's this adjustment being made. Now every converter and every mediator between two parties has to have a relationship with both sides. You can't mediate if you have nothing in common with both sides. It's your mediation ability is because you have something in common with the two parties. It's what you call a mediator, or someone who can get between both and can relate to you and relate to you. Like an interpreter, usually the simple example, interpreter needs to speak both languages or else they're good for nothing. If they're interpreting between two and two, they have to have the language that. So Keser has to reflect both the emanator and the emanations. These are the two levels of Keser. The lower side of Keser, the lower configuration of Keser, called the lower part, called Erech Anpin, the long phase, that's still the infinite. It's not an emanation yet, but it's the infinite as it's already preparing for emanations. It's already looking down at the emanations. The higher level of Keser, which is called Atik Yomin, is looking up to the emanator. So what he's going to say like this: the lower element of Keter, which is already a preparatory state, when it's still infinite, it's still energy that has no definitions. It's the Soving, it's the encompassing light of God. It's willing the world. It's willing the world. But it's already relating to the world because it's willing the world. It's relating to it. It's willing the world without contracting itself to the world. From its elevated, lofty infinity, it wants a finite world. It remains in all of its infinity, but it's looking down at a creation. The higher part, so to speak, the higher dimension of this very level, which means a much deeper level in this light, is not even considering creation. It's looking up towards the emanator from where it's coming from. It's just a emanation. It's a powerful revelation of God's infinite power in its pure infinity, not even considering at all a creation. So we can understand that the distance between these two levels is, as much as we thought the distance between the emanations, which is called like food, little crumbs of energy, and the encompassing light, the surrounding light, the distance between the lower level of the surrounding light and the higher level of the surrounding light is much greater. It's just they sound like it's the same. It's one level, Kesser, the lower level light, but really, in truth, it's way bigger than that. Because what the emanations, and the encompassing lower light have in common is that there is some discussion of limitation there. Either real limitation or a desire for a limited world. So it's looking down at limitation. The infinite light in all of its purity has nothing to do with any limitations and boundaries. So it's infinity in its full purity. Abstraction in its purest form of abstraction. Absolute undefinable light. That's called Atik Yom, an Ancient of Days. How does that impact the world? Not directly, but in an indirect way. Because without that level, you can't have the next level. So in the ultimate scheme of things, you say that level is also part of this divine structure, power that gives life to the world. The indwelling light, each detailed, the desire of God above creation to create the world, and what we might call the desire of the desire, the place from where the desire comes from. But it's not there, it's just pure Ein Sof. And that's captured in a person's home. That's where the concept of a home comes from. It's the distant, and it's reflected in the fact that it's far from your body. The clothing sits on your body because the Sovev energy is close to the creations. It's a direct source for it. But this is a very distant. It's impacting, but from far, far away. It's that vast, distant circle surrounding you. That's why it's not so easy to get a house. Especially if you're getting one of the ultimate buildings that are pivotal in bringing Mashiach to the world. It doesn't come so easy. Unless someone who's very fortunate who's listening to this class who's going to do the dedication. Sorry, that was just a commercial. But it's what we're learning. Okay. There's two levels in Kesser. There is the lower level of the emanator. That's the higher level of the crown. The lower level of lower because it's what he's saying over here is more than just it's a level that it's almost like the tail end of the emanator, and the next level of Kesser. It's like his God is now Hashem, the emanator, says to the creation, I want to communicate with you. I'm going to speak in very like dense words. The emanator says to the emanations, which is really the source of the creations. The creations begin with emanations. The difference between creations and emanations is that creations feel themselves apart from God, and emanations are God himself, his light emanating as something. Okay. But here it is. The emanator, which is the Ein Sof himself, wants to communicate with emanations. And he says, listen here, we're so far apart. So you know what? I'm going to send a representative and you send a representative. The emanations, their representative is this lower Keter level. It's almost like their representative to enter into the infinite space to receive the infinite. The higher part of Keser is like the emanator sending down a representative of him, which is basically he's extending himself downward, and the higher part of Keser is the emanations stretching themselves above and beyond their limitations to meet somewhere in the middle. So based from this setting, you can see so much more how the higher part of Keser is, how the higher dimension or parts of Keser is incomparably greater and higher than the lower element of Keser. And that explains the value of the house over the value of the garment. As he says, the lower element of the emanator, and the second level is Veroish Verisha, the beginning and the starting of Linetzalim to the emanations. Kenoida, as it is known, Shekeser, that the Keser, Uamamutza, is the go-between, Bein HaMatzel, between the emanator, Linetzalim to the emanations. Ukenoida, as it is known, Shekol Davar HaMamutza, everything that stands in between, Tzarech Li is Kolum, Mishneim has to have both. Kamashikasa Be'etz Chaim, as stated in Eitz Chaim from the Arizal. So, the level that is called the beginning and the start of the emanations, that's called a long face. We can see it even in its name. The fact that it's called a long face means it has features. But if it has features, why are you calling it long? Long means it's infinite. So if it's infinite, it doesn't have features. An infinite thing can't be, because it's defined by its features. Long face really means an opposite of two things. It has features. So the answer is it doesn't have any features. But it desires features. So by desiring features, it's considered already the beginning of the features. So it's still infinite, but it's infinite already, as we said earlier. It's the infinite looking down at the emanations. And that's why it's as if it already has the definitions in it. Shumakar, it's called a source. From there, it is drawn his havus eser tikunim. From the lower part of Keser is where the energies flow to bring into existence the 10 sfirot, the 10 tikunim, yud sfiras d'atzilos, which are the 10 attributes of atzilus, of emanation. In other words, so therefore this is considered already in a sense the beginning of the evolution process of the world. Chadarich one. And these emanations that are gonna emanate are gonna come already with a certain system. Well, some are longer, some are shorter, as it says in Pasach Aliyah. But here's an important thing to understand. The Erech Anpin himself, even the lower part of Keser, which is the Erech Anpin, is aloof from the sphirot that come from it. The sphirot that come from it are already really defined. It itself is above the definition, but it's a source for this emanation. And encompass all worlds, and therefore it's still, the Erech Anpin itself still is considered a one power that encompasses all of existence, because it's still simple light. It's not yet defined, and therefore it hasn't adjusted yet to the definitions of creation. But it's already a source for the indwelling light. However, now he's going to share with us what is the ultimate level of Keser. But the higher level of Keser, which is considered the lower level of emanator, which is God himself. The lower, who anikra atik, that's called atik. Atik means removed. Loshin Amatik Harim, which is called Atik, Atika Kadisha, comes from the word he dislodges mountains, which means to uproot. So this level means it's removed from everything. Just like you're uprooting a mountain, you're removing it from the earth. This level is removed from any whatsoever relationship in the world, to definition. It doesn't have any comparison at all. And you can't call this a source for the emanations. The Yud Sfiras HaNetzalim, to the 10 Sfiros that are emanated, the Ein Shaykh Likrois Af B'Shem Makif. You can't even call it an encircler, because this encircling energy has a relationship to what will come from it. Shakol Makif, because an encompassing energy, the fact that it's surrounding something means it has already a relationship, albeit from the outside, and therefore it's still above it, but it still has a relationship. So it has shaykhs. This level, what is it called? It's not a source for creation, it's a source for a source. Rak nikra makif, the makif, in encompassing of the encompassing. It doesn't encompass the worlds, but it encompasses what encompasses the worlds. Bias. That's like a house. Because a house also encompasses the clothing, and inside the clothing is wrapped the person. So it's a double encompassment, but not close by. You generally wouldn't say, "Oh, the house is encompassing on a whole much farther away than where the clothing is." Is just like a house. It's not an encompassing force. The cut of laguf that's close to the body. Like a garment. It's a distant encompassing power far from the person. And that's why the house is also an encompasser. It encompasses what encompasses. It encompasses the human with the clothing the person wears. And your house doesn't change just because you change your clothing. Your house remains exactly the same, whether you're wearing more casual clothing or clothing, or if you're getting dressed up for, to go out to a dinner or something, and you're really at your best, fanciest clothing. The house remains unaffected by it all. It's the same home. Look what it says in that discourse, that heavens are my seat. I just happened to learn that today. This discourse. This is the Parshas Bereshis. Over there in that discourse, he explained why the karbanot, which are the offering of sacrifices, we can't do today only when there is a house. Because in order to offer sacrifices and to accomplish what the sacrifices need to do, we need to have a holy home for the entire Jewish structure, and that's the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple connected us to this level. Now we can understand what we're missing when we don't have the home. We're still connected to the divine. We have the lower interactions. We have the interactions with God on the level of internalized energies. We have the interaction with the garment energies, but we're not connected. We don't have that connection to that farther, higher, infinitely infinite level. Okay. Now, corresponding to these three levels, now, since everything in this world is mirroring and reflecting the divine forces, not only that, everything in our physical world is created through the divine forces, and is an evolution of these powers. That's why the world is structured exactly like these powers. So the way it translates into our life is that we have these three sustainers of life. Is evolves down here below. Gimel b'chinas mazayin, food, levushim and garments. The hechalos means chambers. V'chol davar hayoser gavoya, and everything that is higher, yidasay v'slapshusay lamata b'yoser, becomes enclosed in something lower. That was another point we made earlier. That the higher, once it translates, the more distant, powerful things become lower in the sect that a house is made out of stones, which are lower down here below. Even though it's terms of it's the material, in those stones, what it's representing is unimaginably high. The levels of Atik Yomen are represented in stones when they are formed into a house. So now, all of our food items, which is internalized life, is a result and is drawn from God's indwelling light, that he gives life to each creature and each being in accordance to its capacity. So that is reflected. How does that translate into our world? That we eat food, and each creature has to have its own food. You don't uniform food to everybody. It's very detailed, very specific, very, very, right? And it goes in body. And that's why you also find that food has so much variation in terms of taste. And so much coloring. You have sweet, and you have you have bitter, and you have musuk, and you have sweet. And there's so many variations of food, so many different, every culture has its own food and its own types of food. And there's so, you can make, it's like the world of the culinary, whatever, it goes on and on of how many different dishes and all of that, because that's the point of the Mamalakalam, and it comes in a gazillion different formations because it's chopped up the energy already. And each one is its own feature. I know. So when you go into your kitchen and you start making new ideas and new creativity, realize that you're just reflecting this idea of Mamalakalam, where God too sits in his kitchen and comes up with every different type of combination of, like, I'm going to add a little spice, a little this. I'm going to put into this creature a little bit of that, a little cinnamon, a little jalapeno in this one. It's going to be a little bit of a angry guy, this guy. I want to throw in a little bit of this, a little sweetness. It'll be will have a sweet side as well. It's God being in his kitchen with all these ingredients. But this is the concept. The internalization of all these things creates for the variation. Because all the integration of the 10 Sefirot, because it's the colorfulness of the world. Chesed shebechesed, there is kindness of kindness. Because in general, you have 10 blocks or 10 emanations, but those 10 emanations, through their combinations where they combine one with each other, become gazillions and gazillions of different combinations. Chesed shebechesed, gevura shebegevura. Elechein hamazayin yesh lekoloyin. That's why food has what? And that's why, and that's another thing is, that's why food expires. Because an internalized life becomes mitigated and has a beginning and has an end. It's not an infinite power, so it wears out. Since the food, obviously, the durability of the food is diminished because the energy that the food represents is also something that is not infinite. It has an ending from an internal light that is enclosed and limited in vessels. So that every food, when you buy food, even when you look at food, you see food have expiration dates. You buy a bottle of milk, you see how the expiration date, because it expires. So spiritually, it reflects the levels of the divine that don't last forever, so to speak. But precisely because it's little tiny crumbs of life that is in the food and represents the energies of God that are little crumbs, we are able to completely assimilate them into our narrow little vessels. In other words, we're able to understand it, appreciate it, absorb it, unify with it. Both physical food and this concept of mamala kalam, we're able to integrate it. They become unified, they become one with the person. In an internal life, because their spiritual soul root is in this indwelling light of God, the power of the maker that's in the creation. And finally, we get to the punchline over here. That's why they're cheaper. Also, two things. First of all, you can get them far inexpensively, because spiritually the value of mamala kalalman is much less than soviv kalalman. Although the world obviously needs the mamala kalalman, but the value of it, it's a much lesser divine power. But also another thing is, although he said there's so many different types of foods, that's not, but you don't need that for that's just for entertainment. But it and makes life interesting. But for actual living, a person can go very simple. A little bread and water will do. So in that sense, what that means is that's showing. Let's just say something. That is showing on the. It's a little hard to see what he wants with this. That is indicating on it not being so important to you. You need it. You can't live without it, as we said. But you can get away on the cheapest level, which is taking just bread and water. You need a minimal of it in that sense. And that's because of its devaluation. Because it's not so valuable. Now, when I say not so valuable, we always need to understand it's all relative to something else. With the different types of food, a person can have very dry bread. You can live from just simple bread and salt. But on the other hand, you can eat gourmet food. You can eat so much, a person can spend their time gourmeting. Because its root is in the power of the emanator that's in the So it's very interesting. What's the koach hapol? What's the mamala kalam? The indwelling light of God is a finite infusion, but it's really coming from an infinite place. It's an infinite place dropping small crumbs. How many crumbs can it drop? If the source is infinite, it drops infinite. It can drop infinite. But the value, is that what I'm saying? It has within it two opposites. On the one hand, it's very finite. On the other hand, look at the production from where it's coming from that can come up with infinite creativity. So therefore, in food, you have that. You have the idea that each piece of food is very finite. And it lasts only for a short time. But on the other hand, the variation of possibility goes on and on and on because it's coming from the a infinite source. It's reflecting, of course, everything. It's reflecting the idea. God is showing us, so to speak, metaphorically, this idea of mamala kalam. That's why in the clothing, in the food, it's also so. Which isn't the case, which the case cannot be made regarding garments. Garments is very different. Sharsham lamaila, where do they stem from? Who mebchinas keser, they come from the crown. So when you go shopping, you should know for clothing, you're going on a keser activity. Maybe that's why it's good to go shopping in Crown Heights. Right? If you're buying shirts anyways, you might as well buy them in Crown Heights because you're buying the garments come from Kesser. Sharsham l'maylam b'chinas Kesser, they come from the crown. Rosh l'netzalim, but from the lower side of Kesser. B'chinas makif, which is the encompassing level. L'chein hem lamata gam ki makifim alav. That's why when they turn out, when these energies translate into our world, they appear as clothes. When God is sending us gifts from Kesser, it appears in our world like a new coat, a new pair of shoes. God is gifting you a emanation from Kesser. And it's not translating as an internal life. And therefore they have more necessity than food. They're needed more for a person because in terms of, put it this way, you can go a while without clothing, but if you're in a harsh environment, the clothing, you can live longer without the food than you can live without the garment. If you're in a freezing below zero place, God forbid you can get frostbite or worse than that in a very short period of time. You must have the clothing. You need that. And many times when you go into any harsh environment, in a very hot place, firemen go in, they have to have special protective gear. And they can't survive 2 minutes without it. Without lunch, you can survive more than 2 minutes. You get hungry, you get whatever, but you can. So showing you that, in a sense, it's a higher necessity, the protective thing around the person. In the winter, you can't go without a coat. Unless you want to stay indoors. In the summer too, it can get. That's why they're more expensive. And that's also the reason why they last longer. Now, even though they don't last forever, but the very fact that they last, the expiration date of a shirt is very different than the expiration date of a bottle of milk, or you buy a meat. If you don't freeze it, if you buy a meat, you use it in the next few days. You have to cook the meat. You have to buy a pack of chicken. You have to get it on the into the oven or the grill or whatever it is pretty fast. But clothing can last much longer, and that's because it's connecting. Its spiritual source is of a long-lasting energy that just goes on and on. Because its root is from a higher place. Yoiser memazain, more than food. Because the food comes from the light that is limited in the vessels. Mashenk in levushim, which isn't the case with garments. Sharsham abchenasoiv, they come from the encompassing energy. She'ena muglo b'kelim, that is not limited in the vessels. Elechein ein lem loikaloyin kol kach. They don't have such an expiration. And he brings over here in the parentheses, over there he explains the difference between taste and smell. Taste is more internal. Smell is a more encompassing power. So there he explains that the difference between them and how you see it in it. But I didn't look that up, so I don't remember. And I related this in the other class just a few days ago when we were learning the Mashiach daily 5-minute class, how the little boy prodigy told the rabbis that he doesn't want to get a blessing from. He told his mom he doesn't need to get a blessing from these rabbis who didn't say the Shema. And how did he know that? He says he smells the garment of the fragrance of their clothing. So we're talking how fragrance is connected particularly to clothing. Bezor Parshas Balak Daf Kuf Pei Vav Ayin Amud Aleph. So you see the relationship, because again, smell is also an encompassing light, similar to clothing. And that has a superiority to mazain food. However, homes that are more distant from the body of a person, their root above, their root above comes from the lower level of the emanator. They're not coming from the encompassing energy that's the source for the finite emanations. It's coming from the more distant, transcendence of transcendence. That level that represents the God descending to meet. As we said earlier, God sends him this leveled out to represent him, as opposed to the lower level of Kesser, which is the creation sending a representative to represent them in the divine meeting. The encompassing of the encompassing. Therefore, but precisely because this is coming from such a lofty place, it can't translate into this world unless it collapses and falls. This is too powerful for the world to handle. In other words, if this light would come down into the world in light, the world couldn't handle it. So it has to reconfigure into something very, 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 very low. So we shouldn't pay attention to how lofty it is. And that's what the stones are. And that's why we use stones to build a house, because the real story, the secret of the stones is that they can provide, because they are of that lofty level. And they can create the distant surrounding level around the person. Avanim va'afar. These lofty levels have translated into this physical world as stones and as earth, which from that you make cement and whatever else. Which we see that the garments are not made from something so low. Are produced from vegetation or from animal. But we can see the reflection of how lofty it is, that when we use them to support life, we use them and create a living space where the home itself is far than the person's, creates a big space and is distant from the person's body. And in terms of necessity, it is the most important, because they're more important, even from the garments. You can't live without a home. Afarega, even a second. What does that mean? You see, when a person doesn't know where they're staying, when a person is stuck at the train station, they have no idea where they're going tonight, you feel so not like a person. The fact that the daunting thought that you might sleep on the street and you have nowhere to be is the most frightening thing. And then you start looking around, even if you're not going to have your home, but at least you'll end up in an enclosed area. Interesting words. He says you can't be there even without in a moment. It's more psychological, but it's and obviously, but the most important thing is that it's more expensive. And it can last hundreds of years. The house. Because their root is above, on such a lofty, high level. In the next chapter, he's going to begin to explain how Torah, how these things exist also spiritually in Torah and in mitzvahs. And he's going to say like this. Torah, when we study Torah, is we're assimilating godliness and we're into our soul, into our being. So it's like food that becomes part of you. A mitzvah, you're not assimilating into you. A mitzvah, you're surrendering to God's will. So the mitzvah remains bigger than you. A mitzvah is not food for your soul. Mitzvah is a garment for your soul. Provides that it draws the divine garments down. It draws that level of transcendent energy, God's infinity, to embrace you. When you're doing a mitzvah, you're being embraced by God's infinity, but you're not internalizing it. How do you achieve a home? Where is the home in mitzvahs, in our divine service? He says something really crazy. It's only in the mitzvot. It's also in mitzvahs, but a unique type of a mitzvah that you can't choose consciously. A mitzvah that falls to you without you making a choice. That's the house. That you're not choosing, that comes to you in a way that you never chose it. Because if you can choose it, means it's accessible, it's reachable. It's not. This is the most distant makiv. So you can't choose it, you can't look for it. Gives an example that there are certain mitzvahs you can only do through forgetfulness. For example, there's a mitzvah that when there are sheaves in the field and you forgot a sheaf, you have to leave it to the poor. But you can't deliberately decide to do that mitzvah. The mitzvah has to be given to you as a gift from above, and he's going to bring, there's a certain sage that one day he was fully picking up, his farmers were picking up the sheaves in the field, and they forgot 2 sheaves, and he threw a party that he was merited to do the mitzvah of Shekha. And he said, we're going to go to the holy temple, and we're going to bring 2 oxen to thank God for this. And they said, you do mitzvahs every day? And he said, no, but this mitzvah is very special. This mitzvah I could never choose to do, and it was given to me without a choice. That's a house. Anybody knows anything about our new Mayon building, it did not come about through anybody choosing this with a methodical choice. It didn't come with anybody making any decisions to look for it, to seek for it. It was completely coming from a curveball from outside this. And that's the reason why the donor who's going to give the money is not going to be anybody that I am reaching out to. It's going to be the mysterious person who's going to come from nowhere and give the money. Or it's going to be coming, I don't know where it's coming from. When I learned this, I became very comforted, and now you know why I am teaching this tonight. It is so crazy that dafka a house. Now, I think most people, when they buy homes, do not buy homes like this. They buy homes, they put away money already for years, they have a rational situation, they have money for a down payment, they have a whole situation going. When it comes to the ultimate buildings and the ultimate homes, they have to come in such a way where it cannot come through the conscious choices of a person. It has to fall to you from where? It gives, and to give another example, to become a leader of the Jewish people, which means to become the elevated leader of the Jewish people, you have to run away from the leadership, and the people have to chase you until they make you like Moshe. At Moshe, it's a very big mitzvah to be the leader of the Jewish people. You're the teacher of the Jewish people. It's a mitzvah. You're the king over the people. It's a mitzvah. But it's not a mitzvah you can do willfully. If you want to be the leader, then why? Because it's coming from such a high, deep place, this mitzvah, that you can't, it's coming from the distant market, from the level of house. That's why kingship is called a house. Malchus is called the house of David. And we find that all the biggest leaders of the Jewish people ran from it, and they were given no choice. Their people forced them to be their leaders. Like we find, he brings the story that Shimon ben Shattach, one of the greatest leaders of the Jewish people in the times of the sages, escaped to Egypt because he was afraid they would appoint him. And they somehow managed to get him back and pulled him back. And if we know anything about how much the Alter Rebbe resisted becoming a Rebbe until his teachers forced him, and how much our Rebbe, an entire year of begging and pleading, and the Rebbe would not. And finally, till he gave into it. And Moshe Rabbeinu, and because it's not, it says, anybody that runs after honor, the honor runs away from them. Anybody that runs away from honor, the honor will chase after them. So the honor ran after, uh, which means that this idea, this honorable position, you can't choose it consciously. It has to fall upon you. A home has to fall upon you. That's my insight in this mimer. Mizmar Shir Chanukah Sabayis. Okay, we're gonna leave it over here. I gave you the gist of the next piece, and next week Thursday, Be'ezus Hashem, we will continue learning chapter 2 and chapter 3. Be'ezus Hashem. You know what? Let's learn a little further, because at least let's do half the discourse. So I'm going to go to the end of this page. We have these 3 levels in Torah and mitzvahs. As it is known, Torah is considered food for the soul. And mitzvahs are called garments to the soul. Like it's stated in many places. Now, even though down here mitzvahs seem to be less of a lesser quality than Torah. Torah is intelligence, studying. Mitzvahs is an action. But just like stones are lower, just like stones are lower than plants, and yet stones come from a higher place. You make a more valuable thing. You make a house out of stones. Same as also mitzvahs are so much greater. That's why he's going to bring something. A person is obligated to stop learning Torah when there's a mitzvah, and he's obligated to go do the mitzvah and halt the Torah, because the mitzvah is infinitely higher than Torah. So even though down here the mitzvahs are lower than Torah, they are in physical actions. Nevertheless, we see in their source of the divine, the mitzvah is higher. And where do you see that? You see that what is the subject of the whole Torah? To explain the mitzvahs. So the Torah serves the mitzvahs. The Torah is the guide and the information book of how to do a mitzvah. When you're studying Torah, what are you studying? How do you perform this mitzvah? How do you do that mitzvah? If the Torah is coming to explain the mitzvahs, it means that the mitzvahs are more loftier than the Torah. The Torah is explaining how to do the mitzvah. Whether you're learning the revealed part of the Torah, which is halacha and Talmud, it's all coming to this tractate Masechta Shabbos, tells you how to fulfill the mitzvah of Shabbos. Or even you'll learn Nistar, if you're learning the esoteric part of the Torah, it's explaining the inner dynamics of a mitzvah. Kamei Sefer HaZohar, like the book of Zohar, which goes through the Torah and explains the deeper insights of what the mitzvahs do. The sages also tell you another proof that mitzvah has more value than Torah. The sages say Gadol Talmud. When they had a debate which one is greater, Torah study or mitzvahs, they said Torah study is greater, but they gave a very counter reason. Why is Talmud greater? Because it leads to mitzvahs. Gadol Talmud shemevel de ma'isa. Talmud is great when it brings to action. So you see that action, even the greatness of the Torah study is that it leads you to do more actions. The sages also say the main thing is not to study, the main thing is to act, to do what you learn, to act it out, which means to do the mitzvahs. The sages also say, when it comes to a positive mitzvah, when the court would tell someone, make a sukkah, and the person says, I'm not making one. So in the times when the Torah had physical jurisdiction over the people, in other words, in the time when Jewish life was governed by the Torah and could be enforced, the Jewish government in Israel could force you to do a mitzvah. And the person, they're allowed to beat the person until literally the person dies. It doesn't sound like something anybody would ever do, but conceptually, yes. Why? Because there's no limit to the value of the mitzvah. And if the world needs the mitzvah, how dare you not do it? And its mitzvah is it's but you don't force to study Torah. But to a mitzvah, yeah. And even though they say, Misha terasayim nasay, anybody whose Torah is his profession. I mean, someone who studies Torah day and night, and he doesn't do anything else but learns Torah. Kigan Rashbi v'chaver, like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and his colleagues. We say about them, Ein mafsikin l'tefillah. They would not stop learning their Torah to pray, exempt from praying 3 times a day. Ubrishalmi Perek Shabbos Amru Shafilu leKrishma Ein mafsikin. Even to recite the Shema, to those who study Torah all the time, they didn't even have to stop for the reciting of the Shema. That's only Kriya Shema, even though it's a positive mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah that's not in action. It's a mitzvah that's in speech. It's in a reciting. Avol a mitzvah saseh, but to a positive mitzvah, kamoy sukkah, to sit in a sukkah. You can't say, I'm not going to go eat in the sukkah on Sukkot by night, which is the main mitzvah of eating in the sukkah, because I'm busy learning today. Even Rav Shimon Bar Yochai and the greatest scholars had to stop and go out and eat in the sukkah. The lulav, or to shake the lulav, mechuyev lahafsik, they do have to stop. Like explained in the Jerusalem Talmud, brought down in the book Baal Amor in the first chapter of Masechta Shabbos. Like it says over there, Rashbi does not Rashbi. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, does he not agree? Shemafsikin lase sukkah, that you interrupt your learning to make a sukkah. And what's the reason? Talmud Rashbi. The only reason why Rashbi said that for Shema you don't have to stop, because in a sense, Shema is Torah. You're reciting the Shema. And now you're also reciting, so you're learning a different subject of Torah, but it's all within the same category of Torah study. Shazeh shinon v'zeh shinon. This is a recitation, and this is a recitation. Ein mevatlin shinon mipnei shinon. You don't stop one learning for another learning. Chola now, by the way, this is not for everybody. People who don't study Torah day and night, when it comes to time of the Shema, you have to pray and you have to say the Shema. But those very high caliber Torah scholars, who Torah is their complete life and their profession, these people did not stop for the Shema because now all of this applies. But what are you seeing from here? The incredible superiority of mitzvahs over Torah. And yet, in our world, the way they appear to us, the way we interact with them, Torah seems to be so much more quality than mitzvahs. Because Torah is, you're taking in divine knowledge, you're becoming more of, you're getting all this, and here you're just doing an action. It's a physical act. The highest things fall into the lower things. And Lamata Bishtalshos. Hem Yosef Tachtainim, they're much lower. Shem B'chinas Levushim, they're only garments. And Mekoyram V'shar Sham Lamaila, but their source and their root above, Hu Yoser Gavaya, is in a higher place. Shah Torah Shu B'chinas Mazon, Torah that's called food. Sharsha B'chinas Pnimiyus Yotzfiras Datzilos, is rooted in the internal element of the 10 spheres of Atzilos. Or Raisa Machachma Nafkis, the Torah that stems from Chachma. Chachma is already the 10 attributes, which we discussed earlier. The 10 attributes are part of the emanations. Elachein Limudat Torah Ein Lo Yishir. And that's why we find also that there's no amount for learning Torah. On the one hand, you can learn Torah day and night, but on the other hand, you're not obligated. You can learn a very minimal and you fulfill your mitzvah. Like the sages say, Kigam beperek echad shachris, even if you're just studying one chapter in the morning, perek echad arvis, and one chapter in the evening, yatzi dei chayvus talmud Torah, you fulfill your obligation in studying Torah. V'gam v'gisa b'yayim v'layla, and even the mitzvah which says you should study day and night, you're also fulfill as long as you learn a little Torah by day and a little by night. Because it's food. Food, you have to continuously eat, but you don't have to eat. Clothing you wear all day long. Eating, you don't eat all day long. Eat a little bit. Eat again. It's enough. You can get away with a dry piece of bread. Those who study Torah all day long, those are the gourmet seekers who love eating every kind of food and that's that. but you don't have to. And you can eat variations because it comes from the mamale, which the mamale is so colorful and so rich in all the various different variations. Mitzvahs. But the mitzvahs don't come in so many varieties, meaning a mitzvah is you do this as the time for doing this particular mitzvah, and you just do, and this is it. You don't have like 1,000 different ways to do it. The mitzvahs come from the supernal encompassing power. Pchinas keser, the crown. Keser echad, one crown. Which is higher than the chachma of the world of emanation. When they come down here, how do they come down? As garments. They become garments to the soul. Like we said earlier when it comes to garments. Now, just like in the supernal keser, which is the mediator between the emanator and the emanations. It has two levels. Makif, the regular encompassing, and makif, the encompasser of the encompasser. Kacha mitzvahs. So to the mitzvahs, yesh beis minai mitzvahs. There's two types of mitzvahs, like we said earlier. There are the mitzvahs that you can seek them out and consciously choose to do. Ha'echad stam kol hamitzvahs. The regular, ordinary slew of mitzvahs. They come from a person's will. A person has to, of course, you're obligated to do so, but obligated means now you have to choose what you're obligated to do. A person can technically, unless you have those courts that we spoke about earlier, they can beat you to death for not doing it. But that doesn't apply to most of history and most of the time where anybody, mitzvahs are, if you're showing up to do the mitzvah, you'll do it. You choose to do them. Kamai sukkah. Yeah, you choose to do it. You have to have a will to do it. Velulav and to shake your lulav. Ukahai gavna and the like. V'yesh mitzvahs, but then there are mitzvahs. What do we mean over here that they're not dependent on your will? You can want to do them as much as you want. If it falls to you, you have it. If not, not. It doesn't help wanting it. You can't. Not just different things. A person can say, I want to put on tefillin, I don't find tefillin. But hypothetically, tefillin is something that if you would find tefillin, you could want it and do it. You can't want yourself to forget something. If you forgot it because you wanted to forget, you never really forget, then you didn't fulfill the mitzvah. If a guy's walking through his field and he's pretending he's forgetting, it's not it's no holiness to it. You didn't do the mitzvah. It has to be a real forgetting. They're not dependent in your will. It comes to you not with your will. Like the mitzvah forgetting it, like the charitable gift that comes from the things you forgot. Like it says in the Mishnah, Tosefta, which is Brisa, in the 3rd chapter of Masechtas Peah. There was a story with one pious individual. He forgot a omer, which is a bundle of grain in his field. And he was so excited. He said to his son, most people would say, shucks, oh, now I can't take it. He got so happy. And what did he do? He said, go out, I remember there were two. He said, go offer up in the temple 1 ox for a burnt offering and 1 ox for a meal offering, for a peace offering. So he offered, this guy spent a fortune because he merited to do that mitzvah. Amalei Abba, the son said to him, Dad, why are you rejoicing in this mitzvah more than all the other mitzvahs in the Torah? Amalei, he said to him, Kol mitzvah shebetorah, all the mitzvahs in the Torah, God gave it to us to be performed with our mindfulness, with our choice. Zu, this is that he gave it to me, not with my desire, not to my knowledge. So you would think that seems that should be less reason to celebrate. It's like, I didn't even make a choice to do this. I didn't even participate. The answer is, this is coming from a place, as he explains. He says, if we would have done this willfully, this is still the words of this pious person that's stated in that Tosefta. If we would have done this with a will, this mitzvah would never come our way. You can't willfully forget. People say conveniently forgot, but this doesn't work that way. If you forgot, you forgot. If ki siktzar went kavalay akasa bracha atkan l'shoyin at Tosefta is what the Tosefta is. And what does he mean? It's a gift from above. The level of house has to come from a gift from above. The ultimate home, the ultimate cannot come as a choice you're making. The mitzvahs that are dependent in the knowledge and in the will of person. They too are rooted where? In Keser. The mitzvahs that are dependent in a person. Now remember what we say earlier? We said the lower level of Keser is the level of will. Erech Anpin. God desires the emanations. He's still above the emanation, but he's desiring the emanation. That means it's from the level of the divine desire. What's higher than the divine desire? Not the desire, just the divine. From where the desire comes from. The he who desires. The desire is already something. Then there is the he who desires. And the he himself who desires, that's the higher level of Keser. As we say, it's the end of the emanator, but it's the emanator himself. Therefore, those mitzvot that come from God's will, we match them and do them with our will. Those mitzvahs that God himself is downloading himself to us, not his will. He's not extending his will to us. He's just dropping himself into us. That's when you merit a mitzvah that you forget, and this is not a mitzvah you can take and will it. It has to be given. That building must be such a high building. That's not. Yosef, it's 176. Yosef Hashem is Gematria 176. Yosef Hashem Aleichem. Hashem is giving you a isafa more than any mitzvah. Do you think, I'm asking my student over here, do you think we have any reason to worry about the closing date coming? Good. As he says, they come from the crown, from the level of Erech Anpin. It's a supernal will. It's the root of the emanations. And to the pikas, you emanated. From the very notion that it says you emanate means you want to emanate. That's that level. That's why as the mitzvah appears to us down here, it depends on the person's will. When the person does them, when you do the mitzvah, you draw from the level of God's will. God's will is very high, but it's his will, not him. He sanctified you with his mitzvahs. And you can do the mitzvah with tremendous joy because you're choosing to do it and you're getting into it and you're doing that. Because you're drawing from the supernal will. And you're encompassing yourself with this powerful will of God. And more than the mitzvahs that are particularly not with your will, like the mitzvah of forgetting, hanal, aniskalel, we said earlier, their root is from the lower level of the emanator, which is higher than will. The nikra makif dimakif, it's called the encompassing of the encompassing. The efsher, and it can be So this is the level of Shabbos by Mincha, which is called Zeu B'chinas Raiva the Kol Raiva, the will of all wills. There is will, and then there's the will of all wills, which means the place from the real meaning of the will of all wills, meaning the one who could want, not the will itself. It's from the place from where the will comes from. That's the will of all wills. The will to a will. And therefore, and that's why down here below it also, this chassid said, it is shaloy l'datenu. This is not with my das, not with my choice. It just happened to me. V'ratzana adam. It doesn't come through a person's choosing and wanting and seeking. It just happens. And similar to this, he gave an example. The most extreme one was his forgetfulness. But there's many mitzvahs and dafka shalem. There are many mitzvahs that are given without will. For example, Reb Shimon ben Shattach, like the sage Reb Shimon ben Shattach, Shabarach leMitzrayim, who escaped to Egypt. He was living in the land of Israel, and he knew I guess the previous leader of the generation died, and they were looking to appoint a new leader, and he knew he was the first candidate, and he so did not want this position that he escaped. Al Sharatzalam Noisei Nasi, they wanted to appoint him as the Nasi of the people. He did not want to receive this Nesius. Ubarach, and he escaped. V'ratfu achrav, and they chased after him. They pursued him. V'nasa Nasi, and then he became the leader. And it's interesting to understand, where is there a mitzvah? Like, what mitzvah do you fulfill when you're a Nasi? Is there one? It's not one of the 613 mitzvahs. It says if one of the mitzvahs is to appoint a king, but is the mitzvah to appoint the king? I guess, yeah. If there's a mitzvah to appoint the king, then there has to be a mitzvah in being the king. People have to appoint a king, so the people appointing fulfill the mitzvah by appointing, and the king fulfills the mitzvah by being the appointee. So I guess that's the concept of why it's a mitzvah. V'nasa nasi, and he became a nasi. V'im lo yehoya bereach, but if he would not have escaped, v'hoya b'tzayna lekabel hanasiyas, if he would be standing there waiting, please vote for me, please, to receive the nasiyas, lo yehoya mamana ma'aser liyas nasi. They would have never, from above, heaven would not have appointed him to become the nasi, and therefore the people would have not either thought of it. It's only because he ran, that's why they came after him. Because if you chase, it says in Ethics of the Fathers, people who chase after being popular, the popularity runs away from them. This mitzvah is also coming, the mitzvah of being a nasi, and of being a rebbe, being a leader to the generation, also comes from such a high level of makif to makif, compassing of compass. This is the idea of nasa, above reason completely. And it could be that that's the level that is drawn from the will of all wills. And that's why by the giving of the Torah, they gave them 2 crowns. The 2 crowns represent these levels of Kesser. Nishma is the lower level of mitzvahs. Nasa is a complete nullification. I'm beyond even wanting. I don't want. I'm just. The 2 levels of the supernal crown. The encompassing energy that comes through the hearing. You're just doing it, but without will, without even hearing about it, without even choosing it. There's no you. You nullify your will and your knowledge completely. And therefore they put the nasa before the nishma, because the nasa is higher than the nishma. Because atik comes before erech anpin. He came b'chinas atik b'chinas ein sof, because atik is ein sof kademoin l'chol kadumim. It's from the primordial being that's before anything that's ancient. And from the level of atik yomim comes b'chinas erech anpin. It's almost like from these mitzvahs come all mitzvahs. Okay. And now he gets to the clincher that is so important. In the Shema, the second paragraph called Vahoyem Shemoya. Over there it says, if you fulfill God's commandments, God will bless you. What are the blessings? It gives a whole lot of blessings, amazing blessings. The rains will come, your land will be fertile, and you will gather your grains. That means you'll have plenty of work to do, and you'll have enormous amount of your storages and so forth. You will gather you will work, you will plow. So the Gemara says, hold it, I have a question. It's a great blessing, but it requires the person to do a lot of toil for the blessing. So the Talmud says, hold it. We know that there is prophecies that describe that when the Jews will merit, the nations will do the work for them. V'amdu zarim, others will get up. They will tend to your flocks. They will shepherd your flocks. And that also refers to all the other farm work and so on and so forth. So if we are doing God's will, then why are we blessed that we're going to have so much work and then we're going to be able to reap the rewards of our work in gathering the grains, when in a different verse it says that others will gather it for you? So the Talmud has a very interesting answer. Here is when they're doing the will of the Creator, and here is when they're not doing the will of the Creator. When they're not doing the will of the Creator, then you have to gather your work. When you are doing the will of the Creator, then others will do it for you. So everybody asks the question, what do you mean? Where does it say you will gather your crops? The verse begins, V'haya em Shemaya, if you will listen to God. That means you are doing His will. The answer is like this. There is doing His will, and there is just being Him. Being totally not. There's doing His will, or there is I am yours. I had an interesting story yesterday. It's wow. Everything is so godly here. Everything is so godly. So yesterday I was telling that we had a Pidyon Aben. We had an older guy who needed to be redeemed. Older. I mean, usually you do this when a baby is 30 days old, but his parents didn't do it, so he's doing it. He's 30, in his 30s. So he asked me, I'm a Kohen, to redeem himself. But if you look in a siddur, you don't find the nusach. What are you supposed to say when you redeem yourself? When you redeem a child, you bring the baby in front of the Kohen and you say, my Jewish wife gave birth to this baby. And then the Kohen says to the person, who do you want more? Do you want your baby, or you want to give me, you want me to keep the baby, or you want to take the baby and you can give me coins that you owe me? That's kind of this. There's a back and forth dialogue, and that's how you do the mitzvah. So I was looking online. What do you do when someone redeems himself? It's like that. So basically he says like this. The guy comes to you. It was really funny last night. We were laughing very hard. It says the guy comes to you and he says, I am a firstborn child. I was the one who opened my mother's womb, and I am yours. He has to say, I belong to you. Then the Kohen says, okay, you belong to me. Do you want to stay by me, or do you want to, you want to be my attendee over here, or do you want to live your life? And if you want that, hand over the 5 coins. Another guy goes. But from the words over there was Ani Shalach, I am yours. That's the difference. You can be given over to someone's will, but whenever you have a will, call me, I'll do it. But then there's something much deeper. I am yours. It's not about will. And then automatically, if I am yours, if you have a will, I'll do it. In other words, you're abnegating yourself not to the will, but to the willer of the will. And you're not abnegating your will, you're abnegating yourself. The question is, where is the bond happening? If it's whenever you need something, call me and I will do it for you, which means even if I'm doing other stuff, I'll turn, or when I wanted to use this, my money, my resources for this, for my thing, I'm going to turn it away and I'm going to give it to you. Oh, so I'm taking my will, I'm bending my will in accordance to your will. So there's a bond, a very deep bond. It's a very deep friendship, but it's will to will. But then there's a much higher level. Forget, it's not even will. I am yours. Consider it done. Whatever you're only, that's what Nasa V'nishma meant. We said to God, I am whatever you want. So the second portion of Shema is, and that's the second portion of Shema, it says you will listen, but it doesn't say with all your might. It says with all your heart and all your soul, but not with all your being. So what that means, we're always going to do whatever God wants of us where they're showing up. But it's because we're fulfilling, we are given over to his will. When it says in the other place that when you're doing the will of God, the nations will come and do your work for you, is on a much deeper commitment to God. When you become completely disintegrated in God, and you are him, then you don't have to gather the grain. It will be done for you by others. And that's the level of house. So he's getting it all. Based on this, I got my hunch that this particular situation, I can run around like an idiot, like I've been doing the last few weeks, looking for the money, and that's not where it's going to. It has nothing to do with that. It's going to happen, right? Good. It's not meant to be done through the work. It's others will do it. When you don't do the will of the Creator, you will listen to my mitzvahs. Means you make the will. Here's the difference. It's Gewalt. This is Gewalt. If I say to you, whenever you need anything, call me, you're probably never going to call me because you don't want to bother me. Only when you really have a need, you're going to call me. You really have a desire, you need something very important, you have no choice, you're going to call me. But otherwise, you're not going to call. But if I say to you, I am yours, I'm here. I have nothing. I'm not doing anything else with my life. I am here for you. That's why I exist. So then I actually stimulate in you more wills. Do this, go wrong, go there. And I don't feel I'm bothering you anyway, because I know you are really mine. That's the point. It doesn't hurt. So I create more wills. I pump out more wills. It's almost like I'm standing there waiting for you to will me a will. It's a whole deeper level of commitment and connection. And that's the difference if you're connected on a level of the external crown or you're connected on the level of internal crown. Internal crown means the essence of the person becomes joined with the essence of God. I belong to you. It's a deeper level of soul, much deeper level of soul. In other words, everybody has these levels. The question is, what are we conscious of? In our commitment to God, in our connection to God, on which level are we operating from? To draw down the will from the will of all wills. When we give ourselves over with all ourselves, a complete nullification of will, higher than reason. When the spirit is only with your heart and all your soul, but not with your might, and therefore, when compared to the drawing down from the higher level of Atik, Shu ain't sof mamish, which is literally limitless. That's not called doing the will of the omnipresent. I'm gonna stop over here, but he's gonna also connect this. You see that the highest blessings ever given were given in a way where the blesser made a mistake in the blessing, made a mistake, didn't intend the blessing. Isaac, the highest blessings in the Torah, Isaac's blessings to Jacob, and he gave him accidentally, meaning he thought it was his brother Esau, and he gave it to Esau, and he gave it to Yaakov. Didn't give it to Esau, he gave it to Yaakov. It had to come not with his choice, from a place higher than choice. These are these super blessings. Now, kingship and Mashiach, and this all connected to Mashiach's palace and all, it's all the house. It's all on the level of house. Once you tap that level, things happen on levels that are, you're tapping the essence of the whole deal. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We're going to finish this Be'ezras Hashem next week. May this be enough to have provided for us the miracle we need. Thank you.